Welcome, everybody, to Building My Legacy podcast today. I'm so glad to have you with us. And I have with me today Sallie Holder. Sallie is a fascinating woman. She is an attorney and done a lot of work in employment law. She did her organizational development degree at Vanderbilt University. She is author of Hitting Bottom Middle, the roadmap from empty success to true fulfillment. You have a wonderful way with words. She has a community for women entrepreneurs for coaching them, and it's called Brim. And so I'll have you talk a little bit about that, Sallie. But Sallie has worked with small entrepreneurial type companies as well as the very large companies, FedEx, Michelin. And so she brings to us a vast background of experience, and I'm eager to learn from you what it is that brought you to this point in your book, and then have some questions for you, because I think some of the things that you've been dabbling in with your work, it's not fair to call it dabbling because it's earnest work.
Very true.
I think is so applicable to what everybody's struggling with right now as we come out of the pandemic. So if you start by telling us a little bit about Brim and what you do, then we'll go from there.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Lois. It's an honor to be here and to get to share with your listeners. As you mentioned, I do have a coaching community. It is called the Brim, and that stands for the Beyond Rock Middle Movement. And it is intended to be a collective of female entrepreneurs that can come together and receive coaching and camaraderie and get to experience both in one setting. We have found that especially female entrepreneurs move their businesses 2.5 times faster when they do so in an environment with other female entrepreneurs who are doing the same. And so when I discovered that information, I really wanted to move from the one-on-one setting to this group coaching environment, because I wanted to provide, women with the best opportunity to reach their greatest potential.
Wow, good for you. So tell me a little bit about Rock Middle, because that is such a wonderful play on words. Tell me how you came about that, and you talk about the quiet scream. Right? And it's beautifully said. So share with me how you came to that.
Yeah, so I followed a path of what I refer to now as external success for the majority of my life and career. I went from achieving as a high school student to, a undergraduate degree with honors, straight into law school, and then straight from there to practicing law with the second largest labor and employment law firm in the country. And I thought that if I just followed that model of success, that eventually I would be kind of crowned with some, adornment of fulfillment and content. And sometimes I call it, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow is not in fact gold, but what we really want, which is that sense of joy and happiness, about our lives. And I wasn't feeling any of that. I was feeling like I was frustrated and that I really lacked fulfillment, and that, I had that quiet scream within me. I wanted to yell to the world and say, is this really all there is? Is this really everything that I get after all of those years of work that I put in? And there's got to be more than this. But I kept my voice quiet because I didn't believe that, I should express any dissatisfaction, right? I was listening to what other people were saying, and they were saying, oh, work's just supposed to be hard. It's supposed to be something that you don't always enjoy. And so I just believed that I needed to keep quiet and not say anything about it. And so I stayed in that middle place that I now call rock middle for a really long time, where I had external success, but I really lacked internal fulfillment.
Okay, so for me, as I'm listening to you, what that means is rock bottom to me is when you really feel that sense of failure and you've hit the very bottom. And that probably ends up being a combination of bottom in terms of career and personal life. Because when career falls, personal life begins to fall. When personal life begins to fall, career begins to be impacted, right? So there's that duality. So rock middle to me means you're caught in the middle of expectations of what employers expect of us, what we expect of ourselves, and that sense of purpose and meaning. Am I hearing you correctly?
Absolutely. That it's that middle place where you still have that success, and you're performing and, like you said, doing many of the things that others expect of you, but you likely have this feeling of authenticity on the inside that's not being honored, that's not in a voice that's not being listened to. And for me, what I discovered is that the longer you stay in that middle place, attempting to perform up to someone else's expectations and not listening to your internal voice of authenticity, then that pain begins to grow. The pain of not being who you were meant to be, the pain and the feeling that comes up when you're, not showing up in the way that you really know that you're capable of showing up in the world, then you feel that tension, that frustration. And that is what I call rock middle, because I wanted to put a term to it, because I wanted other people to begin discussing it, because I didn't want anyone else to keep their voice quiet anymore, right? I felt like if we put a terminology on something, that it could be more commonly referred to, that entire experience can be more commonly referred to under shorthand, with just a 2-word phrase, rather than having this kind of amorphous, unidentifiable space that no one really talks about, yet so many people experience.
So, Sally, part of what I hear as you're talking is Gallup's research. And we know from their research that 34%, so 3 out of 10 people only feel fulfilled at work, right? The other 7 do not. And what I'm seeing in the entrepreneurial world is many of those are now going into the entrepreneurial world, but not feeling fulfilled there either, because they haven't figured out what it is that they really want. What's your experience? What are you seeing?
I completely agree with you, Lois. And I think that, what's missing in the middle is that they are applying the same framework that they learned in the corporate world to the entrepreneurial world. And the mindset and the framework needs to be different. You need to be different. And what works in that corporate world is following someone else's voice, right? Following that external model and fitting into their framework and doing things as you're told. But that system doesn't work for the entrepreneurial world. You have to have a voice, a point of view, a perspective that is unique, that you are putting out there. And the only way to achieve that, the only way to authentically do that in a way so that you don't have that disconnect that exists, that did exist for you previously, is for you to know who you are. So instead of turning externally like the corporate world needs and wants you to do, in the entrepreneurial world, you've got to reflect. You've got to turn inwardly. You've got to be, more introspective, and have that willingness to, put that unique voice out there. And when you do that, then you will no longer feel that disconnect in the way that you didn't enjoy in the corporate world. And you will get to, feel that sense of contentment and joy, because you will be following the path that was authentic for you, the one that you really wanted to go out in the entrepreneurial world and create. It's just, we've got to get started turning inward to do that. It's not following a copycat model of what someone else has done.
Amazing. So you talk about the 10 leaks that we need to fix as we move and navigate in this. What are the 10 leaks that we must fix? I want to know.
Well, one thing that I say to people is that, we have energy leaks everywhere, right? And so those energy leaks very often come from doing things that are against the grain for who we were authentically made to be. So, if I want to, pursue for whatever reason being an artist, right? Then being able to define what the destination is where you want to go as an artist is one of the best things that you can do to stop wasting and leaking out energy on a daily basis. Because when you have a very clear destination, you are not exhausting yourself on a daily basis with decision fatigue, right? And so I find a lot of entrepreneurs are wasting their energy on a daily basis because they are experiencing a lot of decision fatigue, meaning they're just having to decide all day, every day, do I go left? Do I go right? And all of that can be solved just by deciding what the destination is for yourself and your business at the outset. Yes, how you get there is going to change on a regular basis, and you have to be flexible on the journey, but it doesn't mean that the final destination will necessarily change. And by that final destination, I mean, are you creating murals, or are you creating, canvases or print work, or define who you are and begin moving towards that. And the sources and the ways in which you sell that might change. Look at the pandemic, right? You had to be willing to pivot from maybe in person to online, but it doesn't mean you have to change what that destination is. And I think especially so, that's been really clear that I've been trying to reinforce to our clients during this pandemic is your destination doesn't need to change. And don't waste any energy on trying to change it simply because, how you're getting there on that road looks a little different than you expected it to be. So that's just one good example of something that I talk about with people as a regular thing that we leak energy out on a daily basis.
So, I mean, I think that's so true. It's so easy to lose sight of destination. And I think part of that is, for me, is separating out what is really critical in terms of decisions and what is nice but not necessary. Because when I made a list one time of my decisions and separated them into those categories, I was appalled at how much time I was spending in the interesting but not necessary pile, right?
Right.
But the ones that were going to move the needle weren't getting the major bulk of my time.
So true. In the Brim, I say for shorthand that my focus is helping women make more money, right? That's my number one focus in the Brim. And so I couldn't agree with you more that I'm constantly bringing women back to talk to them about, is that moving the needle on your revenue stream? And is that what we need to do right now? Is that the focus that's going to make the greatest impact on your business? And so one tool that I constantly recommend for them is doing something that frankly I do myself every Sunday, and that is just spending 1 hour doing Sunday night planning.
Yeah.
I don't give myself more than 1 hour. That way it doesn't become overly burdensome. I know that I'm not going to be there, forever, things that we typically get in our mind that prevent us from wanting to make it a consistent habit. And then, so I will spend 1 hour looking at, just like you said, creating the overall to-do list, and then mapping out when I'm going to attack those things in my schedule. You will quickly weed through all of the things that don't produce revenue when you have to put it as a time block on your schedule for the week, you realize, you know what, that's not that important. I don't want to spend time on that particular to-do item this week because it's not going to move the needle. And so whenever I challenge entrepreneurs to look at their schedule and do some of that Sunday night planning, I find that they are A, far more productive during the week, but B, far more satisfied with the week that they had, because progress is what ultimately helps us feel our happiest, at least according to Sean Aker, who is a happiness researcher. And I love his book, The Happiness Advantage. And he talks about we feel our happiest. Study after study has shown that when we are moving closer and closer towards our greatest potential. So that sets us up for that feeling of happiness too.
So tell me, if I'm an entrepreneur or a middle manager, let's say, or a C-suite executive even, how do I know when I've hit the rock middle of my life?
So one thing I always say is I have a great little quiz on my website, so they can go and take that kind of 10-question quiz to get a much more in-depth look at it, which is just at sallieholder.com. But also, they can ask the simple question of, again, it's a little bit of what I was challenging that artist to do, but I always then ask, who is it with this one wild and precious life that you want to become? And if I had asked that question of myself, right, who is it that I wanted to become many years earlier, I probably would have been doing something different than practicing law. Instead, I just asked myself, what does success look like? And begin to try to create that model. And I didn't realize that that's not what success looked like for me because I hadn't defined it for myself. And so when you ask who you want to become, that's just a very, internal view, really, of what ultimate success looks like for you. And who I wanted to become was someone that had freedom, someone that had flexibility in her life, someone that got to travel, someone that made 7 figures. And I'm unabashed about, the revenue that I want to earn. And if I had looked and said, okay, does the work that I'm doing right now lead me to that destination? When I realized that the answer was a hard no, it wouldn't, right? You're practicing law basically in one state. Now, yes, I did get to travel, but not exactly
Right.
what I'm talking
You
about.
don't go looking at sites when you're traveling for business.
No, you do not. So definitely not in manufacturing plants in the middle of nowhere either, which is what I was doing. So, but yeah, it wasn't matching at all. The life I was creating wasn't matching the destination that I wanted to have, the life that I really wanted to enjoy. And so to me, then it became really clear that my internal was screaming, saying, I want a very different life than the life my external life represented. So that's what I typically ask people if I really, just want to ask them one simple question to determine whether or not they're in rock middle. I say, does the life you have right now lead you to the destination, the type of life you want to have lived when you're done with this whole thing? And if it does right now, great. Like, absolutely thrilled for you. But if it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter what you're doing, what your earnings are, what your revenue is, any of it. You can make a change, right? You can absolutely start again. You can absolutely make the change anytime you make the decision. And it just starts with that one thing, is making a decision.
I think that question about what is it that you want to become, if you're looking back, have you become the person that you want to become? I think that's a huge question. I think it's also going to be a growing question companies are going to be asking as a corporate body. Are we becoming who we want to become? Because I think like it or not, we're going to be continuing to operate at a fair amount of stress in terms of uncertainty, right? Uncertainty brings stress. And when you experience that, what does that really mean? And it's hard to get to where you want to go if you don't know what you want to become.
I couldn't agree more. If you as a company haven't defined, what your ultimate vision is and what your mission is, then get to work on that. So many companies I find right now are jumping into actions, and I say, well, that's great, but be careful, because you don't want to take action that doesn't line up with your ultimate vision and mission for the company, because those are going to be the very actions you unwind first when you get back to quote unquote normalcy. And so in an attempt to take action that is in alignment with your vision, make sure you have that firmed up. Make sure that is an accurate reflection of who you want to become as a company, where you're headed, and then make sure each of the pivots you're making are in alignment with that. And when you do that, then you are a lot less likely to unwind it, but it will be something that came as a benefit of this pandemic rather than as a detriment to it. There are many different ways to spin this. And I think that those companies that thrive as a result of it will be those that made sure that they did that they lined up their actions and their pivots with who they ultimately wanted to become as a company.
One of the things that you also talk about, Sallie, is sort of a 5-step framework that you can use to deal with the rock middle, so to speak. Would you mind sharing what that framework is?
Sure. So in the book, I talk about the concept of be bolder. So each of the letters is an acronym for that framework for, really growing into that bolder version of yourself. And really, it can be implemented at any time. While I very often apply it to the entrepreneurial world, it really can be utilized if you're moving from, like you were saying earlier, from middle management into the C-suite. Anytime you are experiencing change in your life or career, this framework is applicable. And the point is that you are beginning to dream again, right? Beginning to define what this new destination is. So B, you are envisioning a new future, E, and that new future is detailed, it is measurable, it is specific, using a lot of those SMART goals that you're laying out what that new future is going to actually feel like. And then you are making sure that you are avoiding any obstacles along the way. So you are looking at what those obstacles are. Again, expecting obstacles in your path allows you to be, anticipate problems and prevent them from occurring. Those are just a few of them, but the entire framework is laid out in the book, Hitting Rock Middle. You will get that framework as I take you kind of chapter by chapter through it. And then a lot of that same framework is what I coach people in the Brim through as well, is through those stages of success of helping them, build in their foundation and then move their businesses. So I have a lot of CEOs in there as well who run, anywhere from 1 to 10 to $15 million companies, moving their businesses to that bolder future too, using that framework.
What I like about that acronym is, first of all, that's what you want to be, right? You want to be bolder as a leader. And secondly, acronyms you can remember. So,
True.
Right?
True.
We get bombarded with so much. It's like, okay, I was helping one of my kids with their algebra. And I thought, okay, back to formulas again. And it occurred to me, why don't we teach algebra formulas in acronyms? It would be so much easier. And actually, you can create those stories, right? So it becomes easy to remember and why you do the rules. You can put into story form so you can remember. So that's what I like about your Be Bolder.
I am definitely all about simplicity, and the simpler we can make it, right, then the more we can, implement it, really.
So as a person starts to be an entrepreneur and they're thinking about it, what's your advice? How do they begin the process? How do they periodically stop and assess themselves in terms of, are they making progress as they should be making progress? And how do you help people frame that and really begin to ask themselves those questions?
Yeah. Such great questions. Beginning out as an entrepreneur, you know, obviously defining that destination. But what I encourage people to do is then reverse engineer that destination so that they have defined what they need to do on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis to get to that place. It will allow them to remove a lot of the guesswork of what to do in order to reach, that eventual goal. And I find that it is shutting out the noise of what other people tell them that they should do, that often creates the success. And so I find that, obviously it's a plug for the Brim, but whatever coaching community or mastermind or anything that you can get yourself into, I find is so critical. It was critical in my transition from practicing law to creating this community and becoming a coach for entrepreneurs, was having my own coach that could show a mirror to me, to what I could not see. Oftentimes we can't see ourselves. Self can't see self. It's easier for someone else to be able to and have like less of an emotional attachment to the process and be able to point out things to you. So whether it is my community or someone else's, I highly recommend that. You need to be around other people who are taking the kinds of risks and understand the mindset that's involved. And then be committed to the, I guess, to the knowledge and the information that they give you, and that go all in on that community. I think that what I've seen lately is the increase, obviously, of online opportunities for learning have dramatically increased, but that also seems to come with awareness overload or information overload. And so people are then spinning their wheels, searching for information absolutely everywhere and absorbing so much content, so much information, and never actually implementing anything. They're not actualizing any of it. And so, that's why I say pick something that you can trust, whether it's a coach or a group coaching community or a mastermind. Pick something that you can trust and utilize that, and then implement the 80-20 rule. Spend 80% of your time implementing and only 20% of your time absorbing new content and new information. Get out there and take action and be ready to implement and iterate, because that's the only way that you're going to end up learning what works for you, what creates happiness for you. And that's what's most important as an entrepreneur, is that you're happy and satisfied with what you've created. When you're not, you have another cage of your own making, right? And that you're right back in that same loop that you were in the corporate world. So hopefully those will give your listeners some good steps to get started towards creating what it is that they want.
I was going to ask you about that, because ostensibly you could go from having gotten out of that corporate world that you were stuck in that rock middle, moving into freedom, or potential freedom in being an entrepreneur. and being once again stuck in the rock middle of having unrealized vision and mission and purpose, right? So that sense of accomplishment, feeling fulfilled, can still get lost if you don't define who you want to become, which goes back to what you were saying at the beginning. Know who you want to become. So hugely important.
So true. Absolutely.
So, Sallie, your book is on Amazon, is it?
Yes, Amazon. It's on barnesandnoble.com. So you can order it on either place. And, hopefully it will be a very quick, easy read, but give you a really nice framework for creating the change in your life and career that you want to have.
And if people wanted to join your community, how would they go about doing that?
Yes. So I have everything about the Brim on my website, sallieholder.com. My name is spelled a little uniquely in that it's SALLIEHOLDER. So sallieholder.com. And you can always follow me on Instagram. Same thing, at Sallie Holder. I stay on Instagram pretty regularly. So it is my social media outlet of choice for sure.
Okay, super. Before we close, our time goes too quickly when there's something so interesting like this. Thoughts that you have, something that you would like to leave that we haven't talked about that you would like the audience to know?
I think the biggest thing I will leave the audience with is that, it's never too late. At this time in the pandemic, I think that so many people have had this crisis of conscience where they've said, I'm not my happiest, I'm not doing what it is that I'm meant to do. And if you're that person, there are resources out there to help you. I've been in your shoes. I get it. I know how deflating it can feel to feel like you're not living up to your greatest potential. And that I'm here to say that you deserve to do that. That if you are not exactly content and happy with the life you've created, you can create change at any point. And that whether it's myself or anyone else, go and seek out the help to create that change. There are a lot of people out there that want to help. And of course, I would love to be the person to help as well. So, but I want more people to feel empowered to make that change if that's the conclusion they came to during this crisis.
Well, okay. So there's two wonderful resources, everybody, for really looking at your life, what it is that you want, your sense of fulfillment. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening to us today to Building My Legacy podcast. And Sallie, thank you so much for the work you've done and for sharing it with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Lois. It's been an honor.
Thank you for watching my video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell button above. Leave comments. We'd love to hear what you think. And visit our other social media links as well. Thanks much.